Thanks for joining us today on Uptime Logistics, powered by CAP Logistics. I'm your host, Doug Draper, with the Denver Transportation Club, and today's guest is Pete Mento with Crowe, LLP. Crowe is a public accounting and consulting firm, and what Pete does specifically within the organization, he's the managing director for global customs and duties, and there's nobody better to have this conversation with today than Pete. So we're going to jump into this thing. It's about the coronavirus and logistics and its implications and pretty much the unintended consequences of this worldwide pandemic. It's just the start, and the supply chain fallout is going to be felt long into the future. So the timing is perfect. Pete was available to come in and talk. And like I said, he's quite the expert to join us and talk a little bit about it. So, one thing, I was at a trade show last week, and the whole catalyst for this discussion was a friend of mine said he just got an email and his supply chain was about to be blown up because he was smart enough to do some other sourcing outside of China, but all the materials that he makes or that he uses are sourced from China. So his factory is ready to rock and roll, but they can't get any supplies. And then you factor in the Chinese New Year and how things have been delayed, and there's some uncertainty with that. And he said, I don't know what's going to happen for spring and summer. So that was kind of like, hey, this is important for the audience to learn about and to know more about. So Pete, thanks for jumping in. So we're going to kind of take this thing in a little bit of buckets. And so let's talk about the manufacturing side, right? That's a little bit people may not have heard about. It's people and movement of people, but the supply chain and the manufacturing. So give us your thoughts on how the coronavirus and, we use the term a pandemonium, if you will, of what's going on out there specific to manufacturing. So in your day-to-day life, what have you been hearing about how manufacturing is it being impacted?
We can never forget that manufacturing and the supply chain, although it's 2020, and regardless of what Mr. Yang and Elon Musk say, people still matter. And automation has not fully taken over the process of producing goods. When people are out of work and when people are unable to come to work, it has a follow-on effect. Mm-hmm. And unintended consequences are a real problem in our industry. So what I've heard so far is the inability of people to come in and do their jobs, either because they've been banned from being on the streets, they're unable to come in because they're ill, for fear of coming in, added to the fact that it's Chinese New Year. So we're already dealing with that, right? Anybody who's and I'm not sure if everyone in the audience is a transportation and logistics and trade professional, but we should probably talk about Chinese New Year and the fact that there's a period of time where in Asia, business sort of slows down to a crawl and stops. There's amazing moments of activity beforehand that all of us gear up for, and then it slows down a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then it gets crazy again once it starts up again. So this happened at an interesting time. I have a lot of clients who are dealing with this same situation that you're talking about right now, an inability to get raw materials, cut, make, and trim, and products from parts of China simply because, and also a fear of starting up that supply chain again because the products that they need are coming from an area of China that simply they can't get a hold of. Also, there's a tremendous amount of fear about finding space on conveyances, whether it's air or ocean. We were talking before we started rolling about passenger aircraft and the fact that so many passenger aircraft simply aren't moving, right? So having access to this stuff is going to be an issue for manufacturing. And it's a follow-on effect. It's dominoes. One falls, the rest fall.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And I think the last statistics that I showed up, there's 23 municipalities and provinces in China that are just on shutdown. They just don't want people gathering. That's the key factor, and that's how things spread. And things are just it's unbelievable. You mentioned Chinese New Year, and some of our guests may not be familiar with that. So it's every year, obviously, because it's the new year, and it always happens end of January, first part of February, and it's 2 weeks, 10 days. Tell us what that time frame is.
About that. It's dependent on the Lunar New Year, and it's an important holiday culturally, and also it's a time when people go back to where they're from. A lot of folks work in a part of China, live in a part of China they're not from, like a lot of people in the West. Think about yourself. Many of us go back to our hometowns during the holidays to go back and visit our families. It's why it's the busiest travel time of the year during Thanksgiving and Christmas time. Mm-hmm. So imagine, if you will, not a country of 350 million people like America, but rather one of 1.4 billion.
Yeah.
And all of these people who are returning back, many of them, to where they come from, and the number of people who, from one particular part of the country where maybe the sickness could be, who could travel. And I think it's important we also talk about the fact that, and I was saying to you also, a friend of mine who's a physician who said it's the people who are already at risk from one of these viruses who are probably going to die from it. But the sickness of it is a problem. I just saw before we started, there's a little shy, they're saying a little less than 25,000 people infected and a little less than 500 people have died. And who knows about those statistics, about the validity of them. Every tinfoil-hatted person in the world who believes in, all these theories says that those probably aren't true. And who knows? In America, I think we're up to 10 cases that they've talked about. But something that spreads so quickly and can move so rapidly through that workforce, having it move at that same time throughout the country could be devastating. Right. So they're doing what they can, keep people where they are, and then to extend the Chinese New Year more days. I believe it's going to go till the 9th, and then in some places through the 13th, which is quite a long time. Yeah. But to give people a chance to celebrate, to go home.
Right. Yeah. And in the supply chain world, Chinese New Year, people know it's a 2-week disruption, and all of a sudden it's a 3-week. So if you have a good or a commodity that needs to be in the U.S. for a summer sales season, or commitments for manufacturing, or this widget needs to be here so this machine can operate to make this product here in the United States. 2 weeks, yeah, we planned for that. 3 weeks, didn't plan for it. Everything just gets exasperated, and things get a little crazy. Let's talk about the you said conveyance, right? We have the steamship lines and the airlines and things of that nature. It's easy to turn off a plane and say we're not gonna fly. A little more difficult to say we're not sailing a vessel. Talk about how the implications and even the fallout when things are finally, quote unquote, turned back on. What's the implications for the transportation side of the supply chain, primarily getting from Asia over to the U.S.?
So there's two things I wanted to specifically talk about here. The first is we're already hearing about blank sailings, where people are moving physically empty vessels from Asia to the U.S. You have an empty ship, and think about that. Think about the effect that has on the revenue side and for the shareholders of those shipping companies. That's not good. Mm-hmm. And these shipping companies are going to find that pound of flesh, right? And I'm no Nostradamus, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend to understand transportation rates. That's for friends of mine like, Mr. Kelly over at Expeditors to do. But I will say this, whenever Chinese New Year ends, you have a backlog. And even a freshman in macroeconomics can tell you that with supply being low and demand being high, prices generally go up anyway. So at the end of Chinese New Year every year, people tend to see, an inflation on pricing for a while there's a run on space and a difficulty getting that space. Well, imagine if that backlog is bigger, and also if it's been longer. So you can expect that those pressures on price to be upward would be even higher. Mm-hmm. And I can't speak directly to what those numbers will probably be, but again, you don't have to be a Nobel laureate in economics to figure it's probably going to be higher than usual, sure. And that demand will be higher than usual, and space will be at a premium. So if I were one of our listeners, I would probably already be in touch with my providers saying, what are you going to do to ensure that I have space on those vessels?
Sure. Do you think there'll be a coronavirus surcharge? I mean, we've seen that in peak season surcharges. We've seen it in bunker fuels. Do you think it's going to have that level of implication where, hey, here's a flat $400 because we had to reposition boats all over the world? What are your thoughts on that?
Would not surprise me if they came up with a name for it. I hope they will call it the virus surcharge. I would think that's hysterical, but I don't know if they would do that. But putting together something like that would not shock me. I think that the more likely outcome would be that they'll just hide it in the general cost of it. I think, something else to keep in mind is the ability for shipping companies to pull a force majeure about something about this. It's an act of God.
Yeah.
an act of God. We couldn't see this coming.
Right.
So, their ability to manipulate rates based on that begins to go in different directions too, of how much they can raise them. And that becomes pretty complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an excellent point, because we never saw it coming. And to be honest, we don't know when it's going to end.
Yep.
We don't know what's going to happen next week or next month. It could get substantially worse or whatever. You'd mentioned you referred to it as blank sailings, right? So the boat's got to get, and that's obviously to reposition, because there's product in the U.S. or South America or wherever that needs to continue to move. Are there going to be blank sailings back to China to reposition the boats, where you got this vessels moving all over the world with nothing on them? Do you think that would be in that?
If it goes long enough. If it goes long enough, they need containers, you need chassis, you need all these things. So if it goes long enough, I would imagine so. I am old, fat, gray, and bald enough to remember when SARS happened, and the outcry wasn't as bad. I don't know. I think SARS had its own. You look at it now, if you're on Instagram or Facebook, if you're on the Instagrams or the Facebook, like the kids say, if you do the Snapchats, right, you see a lot of the memes and the jokes right now about this. It is, people are making light of it. They're joking about it. There's a once bitten, twice shy attitude about this virus, because we all remember SARS and the swine flu and the effect it had on the business. I posted, it was a $40 billion global economic impact. So there's a once bitten, twice shy attitude now of, we're not letting that happen to us again. We're going to take more drastic, impactful measures right away. We're going to get engaged much earlier than we did before. And if that means we have to move ships, that means that we have to move ships without cargo on them, so be it. I had a professor at the Maritime Academy. His name was Charlie Weeks, Captain Weeks. He smoked a pipe, so we called him Stinky. Stinky. And one of the things he drilled into our heads over and over again is that a ship only makes money when it's quote unquote full and down, which means that it's full of cargo and down to its watermark, meaning that it's full of cargo. There isn't an open space on it. The last thing these shipping companies want to do is blank sailings. Last thing they want to do is move cargo, move containers with nothing in them. So they will do everything they can to make up that money on other people's cargo. And I have a feeling you're going to see that happen whenever this crisis clears.
Yeah. So one of your expertise is obviously with trade agreements. We've been on to talk about that in the past, right? So that's a policy in place. This is more the pandemic. It's not related it's related to movement. But how does this impact the trade agreements that are constantly in motion, right? We have some things that are changing just most recently. Does it have an effect? Does it not have effect? Is it TBD? What are your thoughts related to trade agreements and this disruption?
Where this could have a disruptive effect, and it's unlikely, but I have to be the guy that ruins everything. I get paid to be paranoid. So right. where something could go wrong is that there's an expectation that China buys a certain amount of stuff from us, and there could be an economic downturn could come from this. Let's be realistic. If you have the largest collection of human beings on the planet that are all staying home and not spending money, that could be bad for the second largest physical economy on the planet. And if they're not making money, maybe they're not going to live up to their financial commitments that they agreed to in the phase one deal. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that the things that they agreed to buy, like agricultural products, Chinese people are still going to eat. The service agreements that they went into, automotive, aircraft, it's probably still likely to happen. Does this mean that the Chinese focus their attention more on domestic matters to manage things at home? I think so. But the phase two part of the agreement, I don't think was ever really going to be focused on to any great effect, really, until after the election anyway. Probably, in the first year of the president's second term if he wins. So, no, I'm not so sure about that. Yeah. I think that the broader effect from a trade perspective is you've got a lot of people who are staying at home, not working. You have a lot of people who are fearful right now of traveling, and the effect, the follow-on effect that has, the free rider effect that has on all sorts of other parts of the economy, fuel prices, space and logistics, the ability to turn out new products. Imagine if you have a product launch in the spring of 2020 and you're expecting that to move on air freight. You've just increased your logistics cost if you can get it out of the country to begin with.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's going to be a mess.
Yeah, even if you're willing to spend more money, I mean, literally, sorry, it doesn't exist, right? That conveyance is shut down. Which
I always talk about Amazon. People think that I'm obsessed with that company, and maybe I am. But they lease a obscene amount of cargo aircraft, just an obscene amount of space, and they take up so much room. They're going to do that no matter what. Mm-hmm. They have a brand expectation to deliver whatever people buy from that website. And they're changing the very face of commerce. Virus be damned.
All right.
And that expectation that their clients have is going to also make it more difficult for brand X to live up to theirs, and they don't have the money that Amazon does, mm-hmm. or the cachet or the freight. So they may find themselves on the outside looking in saying, what about my stuff? Trying to get their things into the country. So I mean, you and I have been in this business long enough. There's customers that rattle their checkbooks hard enough, and we jump when that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what do we expect in the future, right? I mean, it's like, so I'm a guy or a gal out there and I'm making a widget overseas. Like, what advice do you have to say, here's what you should be doing, or here's a couple things that you would recommend in the 30 to 60 day range?
So, I keep talking about how old I'm getting. I'm getting so old that I'm getting tired of telling the same stories. Okay? So, I'm getting tired of saying the same things to people and no one listening to me, particularly my daughter, who I love. She does not listen to me. Yeah. And, I tell her all the time, you should learn from my epic Herculean mistakes that your father has done, mm-hmm. but she doesn't. All right. So, Mardi Gras is happening. For people who know me, I spend most of my time this time of year in New Orleans, making really bad decisions involving alcohol, mm-hmm. and skirting around a number of decency laws in the greater Louisiana area. And Louisiana is a very important place to me. New Orleans is a very important place to me. And when Katrina happened and I went down there, there was a spray painted along a wall. Someone had spray painted "Hope is not a strategy" in big, like 3-foot orange mm-hmm. spray painted letters. Hope is not a strategy, right? And I stood there, and I am not embarrassed to admit that I cried big old crocodile tears because mm-hmm. the enormity of all that hit me. The city I loved, they tried to drown it. All these people had been moved away, and the soul of that town was just crushed. And I thought about that. We always hoped that the big storm wouldn't come. We hoped that the levees wouldn't break. We hoped if they did, that the city wouldn't flood. We hoped that if the city was going to flood, we'd get the people out in time. We hoped that if we couldn't get the people out in time, that we'd be able to put them all up and keep them safe. We hoped that the federal government would rebuild the city. We hoped and hoped and hoped, and hope did not work out real well. Mm-hmm. And whenever this crap happens, viruses, port strikes, terrorist attacks, you name it, man. Everybody hoped that it wasn't going to be a problem. They never have a plan B. And logistics has become so precise because we're good at it. Mm-hmm. And particularly American companies, we treat logistics like a science. And all it took was for a bunch of very important people on the production side to start coughing, sneezing, and vomiting. And all of our best made plans of mice and men fell apart like a sandcastle. We did not have a plan B. When President Trump decided that he was going to start the 301 tariffs and throw a dumpster of wrenches into the mix, most companies, no plan B. This is yet another example of people needing to have had a plan B. And sitting down and maybe this will be the slap in the face, right? The smack in the face with the shovel of wisdom that they needed to have had a second option, or to have come up with some other way to have prepared. if you are hoping that you get through this without an issue, you're nuts.
Mm-hmm.
If you're hoping that in the course of the next 10 months, that when Brexit gets sorted out, you'll be fine. Your transfer pricing is going to be in good shape. VAT and duty aren't going to be an issue. You're still going to distribute, no problem. You're a moron. And it's not going to work out, bro. It's not going to work out. And someone in your audit committee or one of your shareholders or one of your customers is going to say, I'm surprised one of you didn't look into this a year ago and take a look at this.
Mm-hmm.
So my advice to people is this is yet another instance where God, Vishnu, whatever you believe in, is saying to you, you need to consider things going horribly wrong.
Yeah. Do you think it's too late to get a plan B?
No, absolutely not.
For this particular situation?
Even this particular situation, there are always people who can produce for you. I think that, let's say, and I'm a very religious man, and I pray to God this would never happen, but let's say that things go terribly wrong in China, and they make this a 60, 90-day long shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they don't, it could have a catastrophic effect for the health of those people over there. Now what? This is the time now to say widgets A, B, C, D, and E, which are critical for our production, can be made in Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Mexico, whatever the case may be, and work it out.
Mm-hmm.
Indiana, Oklahoma, I don't know.
Right.
But find some good place to make these parts.
Yeah.
No?
So I would imagine, based on all of the, emergency plan B, and reactionary is not going to be the best for pricing and structure as a general consumer. So we talked a little bit about, I own a business. Where's your plan B? Get a plan B. As a consumer, I'm thinking that anything I would pretty much consume or purchase is going to increase. We could see those prices delayed a little bit, meaning in a couple of months. But be prepared to pay more money for your stuff, basically, is kind of what I'm thinking. Is that a good?
Yeah. I think it could. I think that the increases, let's be realistic, right? The increases will probably be nominal. And will the seller of the goods consume that in their profit margin in order to continue the sale at that price? I think the broader question, you bring up an excellent point in a bigger sense. We have seen so many upward pressures on price in the past year and a half, whether it's increases to domestic and international prices for transportation, significant increases in warehousing costs, significant increases in tariffs for companies that never had them before. And now, delays to production that could be possible for a lot of companies moving their entire supply chain to other countries. These costs will eventually turn up on the price tag. Will the U.S. company decide to swallow that as part of their margin or pass it on to the client? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's for them to decide. Yeah.
Well, you'd mentioned there's so many things and situations that have happened in the last year. Okay, I'll absorb this one. Okay, I'll absorb this next one. At some point, you can't swallow it anymore, right? You can't. And it'll be interesting.
How long have you been in this business, Doug? How many years?
25.
Okay. So you and I can both agree that this is a business where things just go magnificently wrong all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what other business can you be in where like snails on the inside of the container can just wreck everything?
Yeah.
I remember one time that there was a migration of bison going across a highway that caused like an enormous, like bumper to bumper car crash, like in Wyoming or Montana or something, and closed a major highway for 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
Like strange things that you could never consider. And those, how you know something like that's going to happen? Our life, since we were young men with hope before cynicism ruined us, our life is mostly about putting out fires, about reacting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would love to visit, and I know you're the same way. I love our clients. I love our customers. Many of them are very close friends of mine. And I would love to see them not endlessly have to deal with fixing things reaction-wise and just being able to, do the work up front and things move a little more smoothly.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to do one of these podcasts with some gin and tonics or some whiskey and just a story swap, because I'm just thinking through my mind of all the crazy things in 25 years that have come up exactly like that. Like, how could you ever have predicted that anomaly would happen and the impact that it would have, and this is one of those examples. So it's pretty amazing.
Take into consideration one more thing. Okay. So if they were to put this delay into 60 days, and let's say that they somehow something were to happen and it would be a 60-day delay out of China. Now that just seems absurd, right? And I don't think that's likely. But 5 years ago, would you have thought it was likely that the US would put up to 25% tariff on practically everything being sent here from China? No. We have to expand our minds to believe that the impossible could be possible, because we need to be prepared to have ideas already in our head. Because someone's going to ask us, why didn't you think this could have happened?
Yep. Yeah.
And be ready when it does. So, to really look at the things we talked about today, for those people who don't have a plan in place, they should already start considering it in case this becomes a long, drawn out, protracted issue.
Yeah.
Secondly, and probably more importantly, this will have a follow-on effect on pricing once the delays begin to end. And it will also have an effect on space, because it's going to be a longer delay than usual. There's only so many ships, man. So I would be contacting the people I work with to find out what I can do to make sure that I can secure that space.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I would not walk around with a respirator on thinking the zombie apocalypse is happening.
Yeah.
It's not as bad as people think.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, as this continues to develop, much like the trade agreements, you and I may be talking again. You have a phenomenal perspective, and who the heck knows what's going to happen 2-3 weeks down the road. And hopefully it's over, everybody's safe, everything's controlled, and we're trying to get back to business as usual. So I can't, yeah, agreed. Pete, I can't thank you enough for being on the show today. It's been a great perspective, and the timeliness of us getting together is impactful. So thank you so much. And I'd like to, of course. And I'd like to thank our audience for joining us today on Uptime Logistics. It's powered by Cap Logistics. You can find more information about the show in the description below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. And please visit caplogistics.com for your customized transportation solutions. Pete, again, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Take care, everybody.
See ya.